Hello, everyone. This is Mike Power with Apex Technologies. I appreciate you guys being with us today. We're here with Jim Peterson from Connectwise. We do quarterly type of webinars just to provide additional information and some insight about current IT trends. And as we're leading into the fourth quarter and people are start to plan for the next year, we thought that it would be helpful to maybe discuss some budgeting, some things to think about when you're planning for your IT for next year, and considerations that you may slip your mind, or maybe this isn't the top of mind for you when you're doing your budgeting. But as part of what we do with our clients is that we provide them a good overview of what to consider, what to plan for. So we thought we would bring Jim on. Jim's been working with Connectwise for many years. He's been working with many clients over the years to help them with cybersecurity and IT planning, and to keep them informed on the new trends and what's going on and things to consider. So I appreciate you being here with us today, Jim. And so why don't we just jump right into it? And if anybody has any questions, feel free to let us know, and we'll address those. But thanks again, Jim. Why don't you take it away?
All right. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is such an exciting topic that doesn't get a lot of excitement, because planning for your next evolution of technology, or making sure we're replacing things, or making sure we're keeping up with risks and needs of small businesses, is harder than we give it credit for. And we're going to go into a few different things in here. When we talk about the agenda, what are the challenges for today? Like, how do we struggle with getting that real IT plan together, making sure the funding matches up, and make sure we can deliver on time? What areas do we need to think about, like getting specific for your company? And then we'll wrap this up and see if anybody has any questions. But, starting this off, a couple budgeting challenges that are out there. I know my time in the IT space, we have a lot of different conversations when we go into that fourth quarter, like you're having right now, saying, hey, let's talk about next year. Let's figure out where we're going to be. And, the pushback comes because small businesses are typically really, really focused on their growth, what they're trying to do with their organization, and always trying to control spending. And IT, understandably, oftentimes gets that little bit of a black eye, because we're going to go into it asking for them to try and upgrade and keep up. And then there may be some changes in there because we know it's expensive to the purview of a lot of business owner. And, when it's working, it's hard to get something changed. I think about my car. I'm probably not going to take it in to get new tires or get it overhauled until I start having an issue, So a lot of business owners don't understand that. And they just say, well, it's working. Why would I worry about next year? And then there's obviously that thought of, why not just use last year's information? Why do we always have to change? And we're going to kind of go into how we look at this a little differently for IT in general. When we look at anything we're doing, and we're going to zoom this down into an IT conversation, but we could really pull this out and talk about a lot of different things in business and in life. But most things have this cyclical flow to them. And when we're thinking about technology, we'll have this, hey, there's this growth and plateau phase. And in those, the technology is being very, very effective. It's working, it's doing what it should, and it's helping the organization be effective, be safe, and get work done. Then eventually that technology starts to shift and starts to cost efficiency. And in that decline in tank phase, we know we're seeing protection go down, we're seeing efficiency going down, and we're seeing businesses not keeping up with their competition. So when we think of things like as needed support, and I'll talk a little bit about managed services, Mike, I know you guys are proponents and are in that managed service space, but a lot of businesses still do that as needed support conversation, or at least used to up to several years ago. And they said, well, how do I get into this managed service game? Why do I get into this managed services world? And what can I do about it? We'll talk about that shift that we went through as managed service providers, maybe 20 years ago, but some businesses are still going through today, because we have to take that jump. We have to decide the as needed support, while it's working, quote unquote working, maybe it's not keeping systems as efficient, as effective, and moving businesses forward for that protection like they need in today's market. We know there's a lot of risks out there and a lot of challenges, and we want to stay in front of all of them. When you think about how budgeting helps, specifically, right? It's easy to say, hey, it's going to be X% of revenue based on your industry, or we're going to tack on 5% on what you paid last year, or maybe you get a reduction compared to last year. But if we think about it more strategically on the problems we're trying to solve, we'll typically put them in three buckets. First, we want to stop attacks. Now, this is always getting the views, right? The cybersecurity side, the external attacks, and unfortunately, the internal attacks that happen. We want to put solutions in place that keep up with the volume and sophistication that we have in today's world. Those antivirus solutions, right, that we used 10, 15 years ago do not stop modern attacks. So we have to jump into the next technology and make sure, like the advice that your team is giving your partners and prospects, that they're understanding that a lot of this is really to prevent downtime, not just to keep efficiency. Then there's the ensure uptime. And these are kind of, in a teeter-totter with each other a little bit. When we talk about ensuring uptime, it's not always attacks, right? We can have equipment failure. We could have problems. We could have employee misuse of data, accidental deletion. We could have a lot of things that can take or stall business flow. We want to make sure we're putting technology in place that maximizes that uptime. I think of restoration a lot here. If data were to get deleted, and again, that could be a cyber attack, it could be an accidental deletion, it could be equipment failure, that we can restore that business in the time frame it needs. Mike, I'm sure you guys have had this conversation before. I know I have, where you sit with a business owner and we're like, okay, how fast do you need your data back up if it goes down? And they'll say 8 hours. Well, an hour into an outage, everybody's very stressed, wondering how soon it's going to be back up. And it's just kind of that mismatch.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's the tech debt side of things. And this is the hidden one. When we think of technology debt, what we're saying there is there'll be equipment and software in an organization that, again, is working, that we don't think is causing risk, causing efficiency challenges, and causing security vulnerabilities. That tech debt, we always want to identify and say, how do we move forward and make sure we're as current as we can be? And again, there's budget constraints with everything. We want to make sure we minimize technology debt, because technology debt itself maximizes risk and uptime. When we think specifically about risk, one stat that kind of stands out to me is that there's a breach every 39 seconds. Now, if we go down to small businesses, that increases, I think, to like 14 seconds. It's much higher, but just kind of as a general rule of thumb, we've been on this call for a few minutes now, and we know there's been 4, 5, 6 breaches in the time frame we've been on this call. It's really impactful. We're going to talk a little bit about numbers in a few minutes, but just know that this is occurring. And Mike, I talk about this all the time. We have to see the bad side of this. We have to see the companies that are breached, they get affected, and have to notify their employees, their clients, and their vendors that they've had an issue. We're trying to do everything we can to stop that from happening. That's why we talk about cybersecurity so much. And on that downtime side of things, we know that on average, a 1 minute of downtime for an SMB costs $1,670. Now, the majority of businesses we talk to would say that number seems very high, but when we start adding in all the real costs of a system being offline, it is significantly expensive. We can talk about that 51% also, because one thing we find out is once a data has been affected, if there's data loss that occurred in an organization, and again, this could be through cyber attack or accidental deletion or equipment failure, and we can't restore it, we know 51% of the time those businesses go out of business. They shut down. Part of that is due to the cost of trying to recover it. Part of that is due to the impact in real time that happens when these type of things occur.
Yeah, just to consider, when you think about your client's ability to engage with your business, and when your systems go down, or your some of the main products that you offer to your clients, I mean that the expense adds up quick when you can't service them.
Yeah, it's super painful. And actually, this next slide hits on kind of the topic that you're bringing up here. Because a lot of times we'll say, hey, I'm not worried. I have cyber insurance, right? So if it's a cyber attack, now this doesn't help accidental deletion. This doesn't help data fail or equipment failure. But, we think I have cyber insurance. If somebody comes in and attacks me, I'll just, submit a claim and get paid. Well, Cyber insurance isn't that easy. We find a lot of times that businesses don't have the level of protection that they really need for an attack. They may have the ability to cover a ransom payment or some other cost, but all of those things that you're specifically talking about right now, Mike, we have downtime, we have lost revenue because of that time we're offline and we can't receive orders, we can't make equipment. Third party impact. If let's say your business and my business are connected, I get breached, it goes through to you and affects your business, right? I could be liable for that, fines and penalties and all the reputational damage that can occur. And we think of that one payment, that extortion payment, that $569,000 is the average today. That's only 10 to 20% of that total cost. So we want to make sure we're investing in our eliminating tech debt, investing in our protection, and then making sure we can recover our data because that $569,000 payment really is a $2.8 million cost to the business once you add everything else in. So it's significant. I know in my MSP days, a $2.8 million check was not going to happen. So,
Right.
and I think a lot of small businesses are probably in that same boat. That's why 51% close after a data breach. So where should we spend our time? If we're really looking to stop attacks, ensure uptime, and reduce our technology debt, the three areas of investment to think about are people, process, and technology. Now, this is the simplest way we talk about protection kind of across the board. And this could be managed services, this can be cybersecurity, it can be data protection or backup or BCDR. I mean, lots of different terms used to recover data. But in all those cases, we want to make sure we have the technology that does what we expect it to do. When we talk about antivirus, right, it's not going to protect an organization, but things like endpoint detection and response and managed detection and response can in today's world. We want to make sure we're doing the right technology. That's the easy conversation. Like I know when your team sits down with partners or prospects and we're going through it, we're like, well, here's the four technologies that'll solve a few problems. But we also need that process to make sure that it's working properly, it's deployed properly, and we're keeping it updated. And then
Exactly.
definitely the
Exactly.
people that have the skills to write the processes and execute those steps to make sure it's working right. And when we go into people, what are we looking for? And this is one reason why so many organizations go with managed service providers because we have that level of expertise kind of across the stack. But whether you're looking at your own internal team or you're looking at an IT provider, what we want are when we're investing in our people, we want to make sure we're really up to date on our cybersecurity skills. This is a non-negotiable in today's world. It used to be number three on this list, and we'd have like engineering and understanding Microsoft environments is kind of number one. In today's world, we want to keep bad actors out. And that extends to that SaaS world. We think of Microsoft 365. There are so many different ways to configure security in just a simple Microsoft 365 environment. We have to understand that so we're putting in proper protection. That's the new frontier for attacks as we're going into 26. Data protection is going to also be really, really critical. Where your data lives, no matter where it lives, we want to make sure we can recover that information because anytime we turn recovery over to the bad actors, we put a lot of risk out there. Number one, we're going to have to pay them to do it. Number two, we never know if that data is actually going to be recovered. So we want to make sure our team, the people that we work with, understand where the data is at and how we're going to recover it in an issue. And then we have AI and robotic process automation, right? RPA. We talk about this, and there's tons of terms out there, machine language, AI, agentic AI, there's all these different phrases out there. But what we're saying is our team has to understand how AI can be leveraged to increase capacity and decrease response time, how long it takes to do things. And we'll say the MSP industry is kind of leading the charge when it comes to SMBs because we have to do it. Our efficiency is strictly tied to how well and effective we can be resolving client problems. And then we need to leverage it in cybersecurity because we want AI attacks to be defended by AI security. So they're seeing each other. We would definitely want a man in the loop or a person or a human in the loop all the time. But at the end of the day, we really need those two battling each other. When we think about processes and this is always an interesting conversation because as in the MSP world, processes are our lives. We write everything down, we follow our processes, we're constantly creating new ones. because we want to make sure we build consistency into our small business partners. From the small business IT side, it's not always as common because a lot of times they're working off gut and feel. They're just getting things done and they have a lot of tribal knowledge, which is great. But building those processes for things like AI are really critical. And we think of simple processes that can be put in place, like how do we create an acceptable use policy? How are we going to allow AI to be used in our organization to reduce risk but maximize that upside? How are we going to put restrictions in place to enforce that policy? If I'm working for you, Mike, and you say, hey, we're allowing our corporate version of ChatGPT, but we're not allowing everything else. Well, I may need that gentle reinforcement, not allowing me to go to Gemini and OpenAI and every other place. I might need that restriction in place to help me stop from doing that, to only enforce the ones that are allowed. And then we need that cyber and data defense. And we talked about that a little bit when we need AI versus AI. Just the volume and sophistication of attacks in today's world, we need something that can keep up. And modern technology can't. Legacy technology really struggles. Just throw a point of the data point out there. We think of the number of attacks, just talking about volume. If we looked back 2 years ago, every second there were 400 login attempts on the Microsoft environment every second. These are a malicious one. The next year it went to 4,000. This year it was 7,000. So we're seeing this steep increase in just the volume of attacks in Microsoft 365, and we expect that to continue. So we need technology that can defend against it at that pace. That leads us right into technology. So we won't dig into this stack super deep for right now. Just know that when we're talking about this, if you're watching, right, this doesn't mean this is the right stack or what Mike and his team are recommending. It's just kind of a representation of technology because we want to layer things together. At the end of the day, if an attack were to come in and get past, like an example, like get past our endpoint protection, we want other things to step up and stop that attack, whether it's our web filtering or our security awareness training or even an internal alerting system to notify us what's going on. But at the end of the day, whenever we're building technology stack, we can kind of put that into 3 different buckets. How do we protect from attacks coming from the outside, so our outer defense? How can we keep data safe and stop it from leaking out to the rest of the world, inner defense? And then how do we always ensure our ability to recover? And that's typically going to be our backup, our business continuity, and our SaaS backup solutions that are built specifically to meet business demands. Talking about a couple technologies, and I'm not going to go through these in the depth that we normally would, just kind of bringing awareness to a few different pieces of technology that a modern workplace can use to add or enhance or level up protection. First is looking at the endpoint, right? So we talked a little bit about antivirus. We even talked about endpoint detection and response. Endpoint detection and response in today's world is a great technology. It stops known and unknown threats. But if we want to make sure we're applying people, process, and technology to that defense, we really need to add a layer of visibility to it. So the managed detection and response adds a security operations center to the organization or to the defense so that it's watching 24/7, 365, making sure any issues that come up are resolved super fast. Defending the inbox. 91% of attacks come in through email. It's a huge number. And we know that 85% of small businesses have the minimum level of defense. When we talk about efficacy of any protection system, it's going to be how effective is it at defending against an attack. The minimum solution that 85% of SMBs use has an efficacy of 66%. That means 33% of attacks can go past that solution. Most modern solutions, and I'll throw out some names, whether it's something Apex uses to do an email security, right, gets us up into the 99% efficacy. So adding that additional layer of cybersecurity on top of your traditional inbox can significantly increase its protection. And then obviously, if you're in a compliance company, making sure we're putting solutions in there that help us keep compliant, help us keep data safe, and don't let us accidentally release it to other organizations is really critical. Security awareness training, super critical. Of those 91% of attacks that come through, 74% of attacks involve human behavior, right? We've done something to allow the bad actor in. So we've got to be aware. We want to bring awareness all the time. The old spot the fake conversations that we could use for email just don't cut it anymore. Modern attacks are very sophisticated, add urgency. They look perfect. They may even sound like an email that Mike has sent me in the past. So I have to be very, very careful of those and continually train. Security Information and Event Manager. That's a mouthful to say all the time. It's a legacy technology that we used to talk about a long time ago. It really did a great job of logging alerts from across your network, making sure everything's in a central repository so we can know what happened. We can do a forensic lookup. In today's world, a modern SIEM takes that much further. Not only does it log everything, it correlates to make sure that there's no alerts going across different domains that we need to escalate, but it also can provide real-time protection. In today's world, a modern SIEM can do things like host isolation. If there's an infected machine, it can block it from the rest of the network so that it doesn't infect everybody else. And then obviously that BCDR, we talk about 3-2-1 all the time. 3 copies of your data on 2 different medias, one being far away or offsite. This is going to be really important whether we're on premise with all our data, whether we're fully in the cloud with all our data, or whether like most of us and we have a hybrid of this. All business data, we want to make sure we're following this 3-2-1 rule set. The plus is super important to talk about though, because we rarely get into that conversation. If I'm a bad actor and I get into a network and they're following 3-2-1, but it's not segmented, it doesn't have separate authentication, it's not using things like immutable storage, I can infect and encrypt that environment. And then all of a sudden, your real hard work on 3-2-1 goes out the window because you can't leverage those backups. Making sure you're properly securing and configuring those backup environments is critical to ensure restoration. Enough of technology, right? I could talk about that all day, Mike, and I'm sure that you could too, but I don't know that everybody got on here to talk about technology.
Right.
They talked about a budget, right? So
Right.
so let's talk about like how to go forward with setting a budget for 2026. Well, we're just using these bubbles as an example of there's a lot of things that come into play when you're thinking about where to invest for next year. You're going to have your industry, your risk tolerance, how much tech debt you have, all these different things. And some they're going to be different for every business. So we want to take this understanding, this time to say, well, let's understand where you're at in your technology journey, what's really important for your industry, and what can give you a competitive advantage. Because just stopping attacks and just ensuring uptime, that's all kind of it's hard to prove the ROI a lot of times. Now we can show the peacetime style report saying, hey, we didn't have any issues. But when we start reducing that technology debt and when we ensure that uptime, right, we know that you're up all the time, we can start to decrease some of these bubbles and really make that investment go much further. So thinking a little bit about that next year versus long term, if you have a lot of technology debt as an example, and you can't capture all that or you can't correct all that in 1 year, start to map out with Mike's team is a great example. Start to map out that ideal state. What do we want the technology to look like at the end? And again, that end is always going to change, but build that ideal state. Also understand your cost of downtime. This is a really important factor that every business can use. If you know how much it costs you to be down, you can start looking at your cyber defense, your uptime defense as an investment area to minimize that cost of downtime or reduce it significantly. Insurance gaps, right? Understanding where we're not covered on our insurance policy. Let's say I have a ransomware policy, but I don't have a third party policy. I may want to invest in technology that helps defend that third party style so I'm not the patient zero infecting everybody else. And I also know we have that section 179. Mike, you were going to tell us a little bit about that, how they could leverage
Well,
that for the end of the year.
yeah, we talk with our clients quite a bit about the Section 179. Just as you come in towards the end of the year, there's the benefit of allocating some funds to upgrading hardware. There's also some other systems and cybersecurity investments that you can make that will be covered by this. So it's always something that something to consider and think about this time of year as you're as you plan for next year. It's when a lot of people do invest in those types of hardware and platforms that then they can save some money from a tax advantage standpoint.
Yeah, really looking at saying, hey, if I got the cash and I can write it off this year and not take and avoid that tax hit, that's a really positive thing. I know in my MSP days, we leveraged this a lot. We would buy our equipment at the end of the year when we had the cash and then takes the tax benefit. It was always a good thing.
Right.
When we think about all those things, taking all those ideas, right? The ideal state, what we can attack today, things that are going to reduce threats, ensure uptime, and reduce technology debt, right? We can put all of this into three categories. What are critical investments that our business must do to remain competitive and remain protected? Then what's going to just reduce our risk? If we say, hey, this is going to help our business out, but it's not that real efficiency critical issue. And then that last one is what's just going to make us a little more competitive and start moving the needle a small amount. We want to make sure we understand these so we can ensure that the dollars, the first few dollars, right, go to those critical investments to reduce that risk significantly for your organization. And then wrapping this up, building your own schedule. And Mike, I think you guys do this already. When we talk about this, it shouldn't be a once a year conversation. We shouldn't be just talking about budgeting in November for 2026, right? A quarterly conversation about, hey, we built this plan in Q4 of 2025. Here's how we're going to roll it out. Now in Q1, we're going to talk about the equipment that's going to be replaced or software, or maybe there's nothing. Here's the technology we're going to deploy. Really making sure we're hitting this as we go through the year to space out the time and the impact of the business. Also understanding that as much as we don't want to talk about this, we have to be flexible. When we think of the attacks that are out there and things going on in the world from a security perspective, we know that it can change tomorrow, right? The bad actors lead the charge in the type of attacks. We lead the charge to defend those attacks. But if something brand new comes out, we may need to respond to it. So understanding that everything we're doing, we may have to have a separate conversation if the attacks dramatically shift or if there's a major shift in technology. Now, our hope is that costs are always staying stable and that maybe even we're driving them down through volume and all these other potential avenues. But we want to make sure you're protected as number one. And then there's the basics, right? Thinking monthly about how are we managing our uptime? Do we have a peaceful state? When we say peaceful state, what we're trying to say is we haven't had an attack, we haven't had downtime, we're in good position. Everything's patched. Our managed service company is making sure we're updated and working and that our equipment's being replaced. We want to make sure we understand that so we can have those conversations around our uptime on equipment, cybersecurity, and data protection. So wrapping this up, right? Budgeting is one of those exciting topics for us because we see it as helping businesses move forward, not just spending money, not just protecting attacks, but really getting efficient and competitive in their industry. People, process, and technology is critical. We focus so much on the technology, but a lot of times we miss the boat on that people and process side. By having all three together, we maximize defense and we maximize efficiency. And then staying resilient, right? Data is growing. We're buying more SaaS applications all the time. We're adding more data to those all the time. We want to make sure that we're protecting that information. Wherever business data lives, we want to make sure we have a strategy to recover that information if we have to. So that's it.
All right. Great. Well, let's just see. I do have